Hello and a really big warm welcome to this presentation from the Urban Penguin. My name is Andrew Mallett and today we're going to be taking a look at methods inside of C#. Now C# is an object-oriented programming language and as such we don't have functions. So if we want to encapsulate code into a named block, we can do that through methods. Methods can be in the same class or different class. Very often they are going to be in different classes to your main program. However, for simplifying the demonstration of our methods, we're going to start off before we look at classes at defining methods within our existing class. And we're going to be able to identify the really important definition blocks within a method. So we can look at whether or not we want to accept arguments, looking at whether or not we return data, and looking at the code that we encapsulate within our method. So come on, let's go through and find our IDE and start programming. So let's dive out straight away and see if we can find that IDE and start looking at some of our definitions for different types of methods that we can have in our C# classes. Here I am working in the JetBrains Rider product. This is really good because it's available across platform. So it's available on Linux, it's available on macOS, and it's available, of course, on Windows. It's giving you the same advantages of using the IDE such as Visual Studio with C#, but additionally we have the product ReSharper from JetBrains included with the Rider IDE, so it gives us all of the clever additional elements that you might want to help refactor your code built into Rider in the single subscription. When we look at our default class that we would normally have, we would have our main method that is printing out maybe our hello world statement if we're looking at the default template for creating a console application. Well, we've just modified this a little bit. We've included a new method, and that method is called greet. We call that method from our main method. The idea being is that we want to keep the main method, the entry point to our application, as clean and as understandable as possible. So we can create the complexity of the code in separate methods, and ideally those methods would be in separate classes. For ease of explanation, we're just sticking with the standard program class that we have here. When we look at our method greet, it uses the modifiers private. Private is setting the security. This is our highest level of security, making it only accessible to the same class. Now, we're only using one class, so our security is almost irrelevant. But very simply, we've got the idea of public and private methods or properties. Private is only available to the class it's defined in. Public would be available to all elements of your program. And static means that we don't need to create an instance of our class program. And the use of the word void is referring to the data type of the return value. With void set, we're really saying that this method does not return anything. After the word greet, greet is just the identifier, the name that we are using for our method. The parentheses would then house any parameters that we wanted to pass into our method. Here we're not accepting any parameters to be passed into the method. So we're just doing the simple write line of hello world. Now I know we're not really saving any lines. We had one line before within our main to print the hello world statement. All we've done is put the greet method in. That is still one line when we execute the main code. But we should be able to now see the execution of the program. So we can move across to the run button, and this will then build and execute our code. We briefly saw it flash at the bottom, but I can open up the output a little bit more, and we can see there that we had our hello world printing out perfectly. So this is one example, our most simple method, where we don't return anything, nor do we accept any parameters to be passed through. But let's take a look at another version. I've got 3 versions of this stored in Git. If I switch to a different branch, and let's move to version 2 and check this out. Here we can see when we are calling the method, we're passing greet and an argument. Arguments are the client side of the code. The arguments are passed into parameters. When we look at the definition of our greet method now, we can see that we have the string name equals world. String is the data type that we accept. Name is the name that we are assigning to this parameter, and world is setting a default value. We don't have to set that, that's optional, but then it allows us to access the code either with a name or without a name. Notice also on the console write line, this has changed very slightly to include an interpolated string, so the string starts with $, allowing me to include both our variables and text. So if we try and execute it now, we're executing it with the name Alice, so we don't use the default value. But of course, we could remove the argument from the client side of the code and just have empty parentheses. Now when we execute the code, we're picking up the default value. So this is our second version and shows how we can make use of input parameters. I can comma separate input parameters, so I could then go through and add other parameters into my method. Here it's suggesting that I might want an integer of age and setting a default value. But I'm just going to delete the comma and leave the code as is. Now, keeping then with the theme of this method, we can go through and change to our version 3, where we're going to be able to take a look at utilizing return values. So we've changed our code just a little bit. When we look at the definition of the method, we can see that we're utilizing ushort as the return type. If we specify a return type other than void, we must use the return keyword. And you can see in the return keyword, I'm calculating the length of the name and returning that as an unsigned short. The default data type for length would be an integer, but that's a huge number. An unsigned short allows me up to about 65,000 as my highest value, which is more than enough when I'm looking at calculating a length. So that makes sense that I put it in a shorter or smaller memory allocation. But I just have to make sure then that we are returning the unsigned short. When we look at our calling or client, we use var name length equals greet and Alice. So we're not just calling the function now, we're collecting the return value of the length of our string into the name length variable. As we go through and execute this, we can see then that we've got the hello Alice and the name has 5 letters. So we're picking that up from our length. If we change the name to Bob, I'm sure we could work this one out, but Bob, believe it or not, has 3 letters. So our return value is working and we're able to see the different types of methods that we can create. Some methods that don't accept any parameters and equally don't return anything. We looked at then setting up parameters, and setting up return values.
All that is left to say is thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, then you are probably sadder than I first thought. For more of this drivel, please subscribe, like and comment to @TheUrbanPenguin.